part of Governor Cuomo's budget proposal on Tuesday included a plan to close 2 more prisons, Beacon Correction Facility in the Hudson Valley and Bayview Correctional Facility in Manhattan. As expected, this proposal was met with concern. That's actually not probably the right word, not strong enough, by corrections officers who argue that these cuts will make work more dangerous for their members. Joining me now to discuss this is Don Rowe. He's president of NYSCOBA, the State Corrections Officers Police Benevolent Association. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So I have that right. You guys are angry. This is the second round of prison closings by this particular governor. Should I have that?
Correct, with this governor. We've seen several rounds of closures over the past few years. Certainly the one of 2011 was of historic proportion, 7 facilities. And we are very unhappy that they have gone to the well again in this risk management approach of downsizing the department.
Okay, so we have a couple of statistics that I want to go over here. The first one I want to pop up is the prison population. This is nothing new to you. 66,000 about 10 years ago. Now we're down to 54,000, actually closer to 55. The governor's argument for closing these particular facilities, and in the past, is that beds are going unused, cells are going unfilled, and they're too expensive to maintain. What's the response to that from the union?
Well, the response to that, I'll take us back even farther to 1999 when the inmate population was at its peak, 72,600. At that time, the inmate population was 133% capacity. And that's what we have to look at, that it was so far out of reach of the capacity, and we have dwindled it down. Yes, we don't argue the fact that we are losing inmates and have lost inmates, but we're working within a prison system that still has 4,000 excess double bunks, which was an emergent, temporary solution to an issue back in 1991 under Mario Cuomo. We still haven't taken those bunks down, and the issue that still arises is we're at 100% capacity if you look at the bed space and how it's being used.
But these 2 particular facilities, I think the governor was saying, one of them, I thought he said in Manhattan that it's empty or near empty, and that Beacon was something at 53%, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I take exception to the fact that somebody would mention, and I've heard it mentioned, that it's empty. It was evacuated because of the Superstorm Sandy.
Oh.
Our members were working there that night. Their cars were flooded, they lost vehicles, their lives were possibly in danger at the time.
Were there inmates there at the time?
The inmates were evacuated prior.
I see.
Approximately 150 inmates were evacuated from there.
What's the capacity?
I believe approximately 200.
Okay, so there were inmates there. Where
Correct.
were they taken?
They were displaced at various other female facilities, Bedford Hills and Beacon, which is also on the closure list, and Taconic. He
also cited these numbers that sound really astronomical to people who are not familiar, right? It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000 a year to have an inmate housed at one of these facilities. I mean, I don't know what the average is these days, but it's expensive to have a person incarcerated.
Oh, absolutely, because I think you have to look at the need for staff, the classification of the inmates, and what we actually do with the inmates. You need a certain amount of staff to provide a certain amount of security, whether it's a mental health segregation inmate, whether it's work release, medium, maximum.
So the savings is an estimated, if in fact these get closed, $18.7 million in this current budget, $62.1 million in 2014-2015. That's a pretty sizable chunk of change.
Absolutely, but that $62 million is a estimate on this sale of Bayview, which is in Lower Manhattan.
And the 7 facilities that were closed, if I remember correctly, in 2011 that you referenced, there was supposed to be money put aside to help communities redevelop them because they are a significant economic engine for really poor upstate communities, save for these particular job creators. And how is that process going?
As far as the economic monies, I'm not aware that any of them has been dispersed or utilized. No facility has been sold in the state as far as any closure is concerned. There is a recommendation in the budget to I believe, transferred Fulton Correctional Facility over to another agency, or not an agency, I believe a non-for-profit.
They're a little hard to market, I would expect.
Certainly with their locations and their age, and that's part of the issue we have with the 60-day closure that he's asking for. Actually, I believe it's disrespectful to our members, especially in this climate and in this budget, to not adhere to the 1-year notification for the community and for our members. You
almost routinely bring up this issue of safety, right? And overcrowding, and how it creates an unsafe condition for your members. We also have another graphic, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the third one that we've got there. This is actually the inmate to staff ratio. I'm sure you've seen that. It's going down, and yet not as quickly as the prison population has gone down. I mean, the usual critique, and the governor used it, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago, is that prisons are an economic engine for largely white communities on the backs of largely black and brown inmates. And that's a difficult argument to combat.
Well, I think the argument is our concerns about who's incarcerated, why they're incarcerated, that falls on the public policy. We are charged with the care, custody, and control of the inmate population. Where the facility is placed is, again, up to public policy. And some regions didn't want prisons under the prison explosion. And actually, we took over numerous vacant state buildings throughout the state during the 90s, or the 80s and the early 90s with the explosion. And basically, we retrofitted them and made them prisons.
This is the third graphic we have it now on the violence question. I mean, I think that generally speaking, what the administration says is, well, we're not closing maximum security prisons, and the violence incidents of inmate on staff assaults are holding fairly steady and dropping slowly. But you nevertheless maintain that the job is becoming increasingly unsafe?
Absolutely. I mean, if you talk about assaults as far as inmate to officer ratio, that, as you said, that ratio has gone down. There should be much less assaults than there were, say, 10 years ago. What you have is the reason why they're not closing maximum security facilities is because we're at 120% capacity in our maximum security facilities. And we have maximum security inmates in medium security facilities.
So if in fact this goes through, what will you do?
Well, it's a hardship on our members. Right now with the closure in New York City and the closure in the lower Mid-Hudson, there you have 160 families that are going to be affected, and that's coupled and compounded with approximately 500 that were affected just a little over a year ago. So there's nowhere for these people to go.
When you bring up the issue of changing the notification, is that something you can challenge legally?
If it's within the Article 7 language, as they have in the past, they've done it under financial need, under financial stressful times. It was accepted by the legislature. We're certainly going to argue that with the legislature and ask that at least that be removed, if not the closures themselves.
Okay, so a lot of jobs at stake at a time when the governor also is pushing very hard for economic development in upstate New York. He doesn't consider prisons economic development. It's different, of course, because his father built a number of these prisons. Not the two that we're talking about, though.
No.
Well, we'll keep tabs on this. I want to thank you very much for being here, Don. It's good to see you.